Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit, and welcome to this week's episode. I'm going to be sharing with you some of my reflections, contemplations, and general thoughts about the coming week, which is April 1st, 2024. And as always, my invitation is for you to give yourself plenty of space to feel into and receive your own knowing, your own emotions, some of the thoughts and ideas that come through for you, and to really allow my words to become a mirror and reflections for you to feel into and discern what feels true for you for the coming week. So overall, the coming week feels to me like it can bring some intensity. The phrase that keeps coming up was cry for help. And at first, there was a part of me that was a little reluctant in sharing this phrase because it's not a neutral phrase, right? When we hear the phrase cry for help, it brings up a lot for us. Immediately, there was a part of me that was worried about what we might be able to see this coming week with a lot of the intense transits that we are seeing. And it may bring some anxiety for you too. And as I continue to feel into the coming week, it feels to me like it's very appropriate to share this phrase because in sitting with the potential discomfort that can come up as we contemplate the idea of a cry for help, we may gain some wisdom. We may gain some knowledge. It may help put things into perspective. At the heart of this phrase, in my opinion, is there's an opportunity in the coming week to cultivate awareness around the energetics of pain. And so it may be really helpful to notice the places and the relationships and the times when we feel the need to immediately jump into what do I need to do about this pain that I'm feeling or this pain that I'm perceiving another person is feeling. I would say that this is a powerful week to be really deeply in tune and in touch with your own relationship to pain. Chances are how you grew up, the parents and the parenting that you received as a child, the environment that you were surrounded by when you were growing up will determine your relationship with pain and your reactions to pain. If any of you watched the movie Dune, the recent remake that had Timothée Chalamet, I thought it was really interesting that there was this one scene where the Reverend Mother put Paul's hand through the box in order to test his reaction to pain. And it feels to me like this coming week brings some of these themes where we might find ourselves in a place where pain really flares up. And yet, it may be the case that our attempt to immediately and instantly solve what we believe is the source of the pain, or to go straight to the pain to try to figure out why we are in pain is actually going to result in futility. What I mean by that is not that there's no wisdom in going into those places, but rather that we may not find a resolution we think we are looking for. And so there is a quality about the coming week that is a little bit trickstery, that is a little bit of a mirage, that's a little bit of the matrix or the Maya coming online, and perhaps giving us an opportunity to look deeper into what is beneath the pain. What are some of the stories that we are holding on to? What are some of the patterns that we are unconsciously running that perpetuated or perhaps even amplified the pain beyond what is actually necessary? So there's a difference here. There's a line we can draw between actual pain, very physical or emotional pain that is rooted in an immediate need that needs to be resolved right away, versus pain that comes from certain ways of being, certain ways of thinking, certain ways of relating that bind us, that keeps us stuck in a loop, and there's a lot of noise around that loop, right? And so consider the possibility that whatever is coming up in the coming week, your job is to notice, your job is to take some notes, and your job is to make space for that pain. And as you make space for the pain, and you give yourself a chance to validate the pain, you might start to notice the intensity of that pain getting a little bit less loud, simply because naturally, as you make space for the pain, you release some of the influence or some of the effects that come from holding on to certain narratives, certain beliefs that contribute to the amplification of the pain. This is also a great week to allow tears to flow. If there are tears that want to come through, let it be there. Let yourself fully witness the pain you are experiencing. And remember that that's not the end of the story. That's not the be-all and all. That the pain itself is very often one of the bus stops and not the final stop. Another theme that I see running through the astrology and the energetics of the coming week is that this is a week that may bring a lot of surprises. This is a week that can be quite a mixed bag, that you may suddenly be directed towards certain directions or certain curiosities, certain relationships that you didn't fully account for on a logical level. And this can be a little disorienting, but what I will say about it is to go with the flow. As long as no one gets hurt, as long as this isn't blatantly harmful towards your well-being or the well-being of others, it may be really helpful to let yourself follow the trail and to give yourself permission to fall down the rabbit hole, so to speak. All right, so let's talk about the breakdown of the astrology. On Monday, April 1st, we have Mercury stationing retrograde in 27-degree Aries. To me, this transit brings an intensification and simultaneously a potential obscuration. So, what do I mean by that? Let me give two examples. One is an unpleasant example, and another one is a semi-pleasant example. So an unpleasant example of an intensification that also comes with obscuration is that we may be feeling irritation, anger, impatience that are accompanied by an inability to clearly pinpoint why, or that is accompanied by a fear of communicating in a way that will be received well by others. This is a very uncomfortable experience because there's a large surge of energy when we think about it from a neutral perspective. Irritation, anger, impatience are really places or times, circumstances where we feel a rising of excess energy more than what we are able to let flow into the situations that are in front of us, right? And to me, it's really helpful if this is a situation that we encounter to stay rooted in our own experience, to acknowledge that we are irritated or angry or impatient without feeling the need to make a lot of mental stories about it, to make it about, oh, this is this person's fault or this was my fault, right? Just letting the raw energy be there. A semi-pleasant example of this may be an arousal of passion or creative inspiration that we can't fully make sense of. So Aries is cardinal fire in astrology, right? Aries is that friction that initiates the fire. So when we think about Aries, perhaps we can think about that friction between the match and the box, right? That creates the first flicker of the flame. Scientifically, fire is dependent on three ingredients: heat, fuel, and oxygen. Heat and oxygen, in terms of how they produce fire, is pretty self-explanatory, right? We understand that in order for fire to start, obviously, we need some heat and we also need oxygen, because if there's absolutely no oxygen, then it will just be extinguished. The other element is fuel, right? We need an object that is flammable, like maybe fabric or wood, in order for fire to start. Metaphorically, I find this helpful because not everyone is comfortable with the brash energy of Aries when starting a fire. But that doesn't mean that you can't start a fire just because you are uncomfortable with that energy, that dynamic, perhaps potentially reckless energy, that speed mixed with flammability. It doesn't mean that there's anything inherently wrong with the fire itself. One way that I've been thinking about Aries energy, especially in light of the fact that the North Node is in Aries, is you can think of riding a dragon, right? Obviously, none of us have ever really ridden a dragon. At least I don't think, maybe in your dreams. But when we watch movies of characters riding a dragon, it's very volatile. It's very uncertain. But volatility and uncertainty don't immediately equal harm or danger. Just because something is volatile, just because something is uncertain, doesn't mean that it's going to hurt you. It just means that you need to work with the energy of uncertainty and to perhaps build up a little bit of capacity around it. And so, if I can give any advice for this Mercury in retrograde, is to take measured risks. Spend time to consider what are the best case scenarios that can come out of this thing that I am being propelled to do, or I'm being propelled to take action on? And what are some of the worst case scenarios? And finally, what I like to do after I think about the best and the worst case scenarios is consider what are some of the most likely scenarios. If the worst case scenario is just our own ego being a little bit bruised, then it's probably a good time to go for it. And at the same time, keep an open mind. Orient towards experimenting rather than trying to intentionally manufacture the highest level of success. The next transit we have coming up is Venus conjoining Neptune in Pisces, and this happens on Wednesday, April 3rd. This to me feels like a sensual, meditative transit. This is a great transit to let your imagination take over before Venus leaves Pisces and enters Aries. Making art in general is very supported for this particular transit. You may want to create poetry or some visual collage, or maybe make some music. This is a delicious time for lovemaking, be that literal or metaphorical, in whatever embodiment of love makes sense to you, maybe with others or maybe with self. And recently, another great use or another great activity to engage with during this transit is a gratitude practice. Recently, someone suggested a particular gratitude practice. I can't remember who, but essentially what they said was to write a letter to someone who's made a difference in your life. This is particularly potent if the person who potentially impacted you in a positive way didn't fully know their impact, right? Or maybe you haven't had a chance to communicate this impact with them. Perhaps there's a spiritual teacher or a mentor whose work has helped you build your own practice. This is a great time to let them know. Another activity that I think can be incredible for Venus meeting up with Neptune in Pisces is a practice from Elizabeth Gilbert called Letter from Love. So I'm going to read you a post on Elizabeth Gilbert's Substack that she shared about this particular practice. It's a little bit long, but I think it's going to be a really beautiful invitation for you to perhaps feel into and to try out if it resonates with you. So this is in the words of Elizabeth Gilbert. Find a quiet moment when you can still your thoughts a bit. If you are feeling separated from love, maybe read a poem or a piece of writing that moves you and opens your heart. Or think about a person or an animal who you find easy to love. Let your heart soften. Let that love in. Open up a notebook. I find it's most intimate to write this by hand, but you can use a laptop if you would like, and write down this one question. Dear love, what would you have me know today? And then allow the answer to come. What would unconditional love tell you if it had a voice? What does your heart need to hear today in this exact moment? Where is the suffering and what does it long to be told? What reassurance or comfort does your spirit need? Let the words come. If you are feeling stuck, imagine what you would say to a dear and beloved friend if they needed comfort or reassurance. Write those words, but to yourself. Don't overthink this. Don't work on this. Don't take more than 5 minutes to write, or else it will stop being an intuitive practice and it will start being an intellectual one. The goal here is to put your brain on a shelf and connect with love directly. After all, this is heart work, not head work. And don't try to do any fancy writing. This isn't a place to show what a gifted writer you are. This is not meant to be artful. It's just a practice in which you reach out to your own soul, from your own heart, from a position of simple friendliness and affection. We want to hear the voice of unconditional love speaking through you, from you, toward you, and as you. If the practice feels self-conscious or unnatural, just think for a minute about how easy it is to listen to and believe your most negative thoughts. We tend not to question the legitimacy of those critical, cynical voices, do we? You can ask those voices to step aside for a bit while you connect with love. Tell them you'll be back. They'll still be there waiting, though my hope is that they become weaker with every letter. Give it a try, just for a few minutes. Another way to tap into your direct line to love is to use endearments for yourself. It is human nature to create sweet nicknames for people and animals we love, but it's so rare that we apply them to ourselves. In the first few days of this public exercise, I was delighted to read letters here in which people referred to themselves as my little pebble, my pal, my sweetest baby birdie, little piglet, my little pot sticker, honey, Pookie, my little humbug, my Valkyrie, sweet pea, my little boy, my anxious little squirrel. Have fun with your endearments. Try to be truly open without fear or embarrassment. In other words, let your guard down, my anxious little squirrels. If the practice still feels unnatural to you, let it go for now. Try again in an hour, or in a day, or in a week. Love will be there waiting for you, and so will we. I thought that was just incredible. And so I will make sure to link it in the show notes if you would like to read the piece yourself and if you would like to refer to it week by week. Venus conjoining Neptune in Pisces to me feels like permission to get lost in the sauce, especially if this is a practice or if you are speaking to a person that feels like a safe person to do this with. If you know that they won't be making fun of you, I think this is time to go a little bit corny, a little bit cheesy. Okay, so moving on. On Thursday, April 4th, we have the Sun conjoining the North Node in Aries. Now, this is what we call an intense transit. The Sun, in its essential nature, wants to illuminate, clarify, unveil that which has been hidden or obscured. Another way to think about the Sun is that the Sun brings to the center some themes that are actually important, some themes that lie at the center that perhaps we haven't done the work or haven't built the capacity to actually put in the center. The Sun is the center of gravity for the solar system. It's the object around which all of life as we know it revolves. And on the other hand, the North Node is Rahu in the Vedic lore. And so the North Node is the head of the dragon. It's severed from its tail and it's forever hungry, right? This head of the dragon is always looking for more. It's always seeking more. And so if there are any transits that are deeply connected to the eclipse, it would be this one. Currently, as you may be aware of, we are in eclipse season. And so this is a great day to really pay attention to anything and everything that comes up, that catches your attention. This transit has the potential to really show you what this eclipse is about for you, as well as the trajectory of the North Node being in Aries and the South Node being in Libra, right? Which is going to last until approximately January of next year, 2025. So, my recommendation is for you to approach this transit with the most basic literary device, right? Which is the 5 Ws and the H. So, consider what is going on, right? Start with the what. What are some of the themes that are arising within you and outside of you? Who are involved? And what forces or processes or archetypes might these people represent in your life? Where is this happening in your life? Which areas of life is this happening in? Why is this happening? Notice that when we ask the question why, oftentimes we get into the mental realm, right? So there may be a story here, and my invitation is for you to give yourself space to look at why and to look at the mental stories, but also simultaneously, perhaps you don't need to assign too much gravity into these stories, right? Instead, simply notice the stories. See, oh, this is an interesting perspective, right? Or, okay, that feels true and feels aligned with my ego, with my identity stories. And okay, I see that, right? Without fully kind of getting into it and getting all worked up about it. You may also want to ask along a similar line, when did the cycle begin? Can you remember the earliest times when the storyline starts, right? And sometimes the beginning of the storyline is a very instructive point for us to contemplate on what this is all about. And finally, ask yourself the how. How is life asking you to show up? This is where nuance gets very interesting, because we are always invited by each present moment to show up slightly differently, right? There are times when, based on our internal resources and also what is available to us and what we have access to externally, perhaps we are asked to detach a little bit. Maybe there's nothing to do. Maybe you're just here to watch the story unfold. Perhaps you're being asked to lean in, that maybe there's something that you haven't really wanted to see, there's something you haven't really wanted to be in relationship with, that you're asked to pay deeper attention towards, or maybe be a bit more active. Maybe you do know what you are being asked to do. Something that one of my mentors like to say when she asks the question and we say, I don't know, is what if you do know? Or what do you know? And start there, right? If you start with what you do know, what opens up? And perhaps you're also being asked to be sensitive and to be fluid on a moment-to-moment basis, right? Perhaps this situation sometimes requires you to lean in and other times require you to lean back. If this transit feels very intense for you, you may want to also go back to last week's episode where I talked and I did a bit of a deep dive on eclipses and this particular eclipse season. In general, eclipses are not always pleasant, and eclipses tend to ask us to simply reduce the stimulus and increase rest. To me, eclipses are times when we're allowed to take a step back, to really be with the fullness of our own experience, but to not feel like we have to direct our will towards any specific outcome. In other words, less work, more nap. Less social media, more slow, deliberate, quality time with our loved ones. Eclipse energy can be really intense, so it also tends to show us where we are unnecessarily pouring gasoline into an already warm enough fire, so to speak. On Friday, April 5th, Venus enters Aries. This to me marks a turning point during this particular eclipse season. Venus has been in Pisces where it is exalted, and now it's entering Aries where Venus is in detriment. This doesn't mean Venus is not able to bring love or harmony or collaboration or art. Venus still maintains their essential nature even in Aries, the place that is perhaps a little bit uncomfortable in terms of the resources that are available to Venus. But when planets are in a sign where it's traditionally their detriment, the resources available at their disposal are unconventional. Venus needs to get creative. Venus may have to work a little bit harder. Venus may have to have some challenging conversations, even if their deepest desire is to relax, to enjoy, and to receive. Venus in Aries makes me think about those fights, those big, loud disagreements that we sometimes need to have with our loved ones if we want to deepen into a more expansive container for the relationship. I bet this is an experience that many of us have had, right? That before we get into deeper and more secure attachments within our relationships, sometimes we have to fight. Sometimes we have to talk about the places where we disagree. Venus in Aries also makes me think about some of the brash measures that sometimes we need to take in order to make it abundantly clear to the world that something really matters to us. That in order for the people around us, or perhaps even society at large, to fully understand what matters, sometimes we need to make a little bit of extra noise, right? This is making me think about, for example, the Stonewall riot, right? A lot of social change and social movements are not always marked by constant harmony, right? The true quest for peace and liberation sometimes requires us to get a little loud, to make some noise, and to question loudly and in public, which may cause some feathers to be ruffled. On a larger scale, the lunar eclipse last week had the ruler of both the North and the South node being in Pisces, which is a nocturnal and receptive sign, and the solar eclipse that we're about to have next week on April 8th is very different because the ruler of the South node is going to be in Aries, right? And so all of this is really related, in my opinion, to Venus entering Aries because in my own experience, Venus in Aries is always a lot hotter than Venus in Pisces, right? And the shift can be quite visceral and quite surprising. On Saturday, April 6th, we have Venus in Aries sextiling Pluto in Aquarius. So sextiles tend to be quite subtle, but context is always king, and so it really depends on which planets are involved and which signs they're in when we are thinking about the quality of a particular transit, right? Venus in Aries, as we have briefly discussed, is not really a subtle energy, right? This is a transit that can bring up potential disagreements and unconventional ways to really test what can be brought closer and what must drift apart in order to prioritize meaningful, resonant connections and perhaps even art making. I would say with this transit of Venus sextiling Pluto, it's important to contemplate on the concept of agency. Not just our own agency, but also the agency of everybody else. So, with Venus being ruled by Mars in Pisces, one thing I'm thinking about is there's a unique trickiness to the confrontations that may come up. There's potential when we are being confronted with the opportunity to come forward with our honest, true feelings, to get a little bit lost in the mental stories around why others make the decisions they do. As an example, if you feel that someone treats you unfairly or disrespectfully, or someone's action makes you feel some type of way, it may be a lot easier to consider all of the ways that their experiences and their own unique cocktail of trauma contribute to their action. It may be easy to get a little bit lost in the activity of trying to justify and figure out why someone acts the way they do, rather than to simply let them know how their actions make you feel. This is risky, right? It is risky to assert ourselves. It is risky to allow ourselves be seen in the places where perhaps being seen by others can cause relational rupture, or can cause the person to then feel bad about themselves and their actions, which in turn can also make you feel bad about having come forward, right? But if we want to relate to the world from a place of honesty, sometimes the most important thing that you can do is simply to be honest with yourselves and with others about how situations make you feel, even if it's not pretty. And doesn't mean that we have to do this in a way that is rude or inconsiderate. There's certainly something to be said about cultivating skillfulness and giving ourselves a lot of space to be graceful when we are being honest. Honesty doesn't have to mean you have to be mean, right? Doesn't mean that you have to disrespect someone. Doesn't mean you have to belittle or berate someone. But being clear and direct with your honesty may put things into motion in ways that are beyond your mental precognition or mental planning. In my own experience, when we are honest with ourselves and with one another, it puts things into motion. It often accelerates certain processes that may otherwise either come out distorted or take a long time to get to if we take a leisurely, spiralic drive around the block, right? And so there's always risk involved in being fully honest with ourselves and with others, because there's an unexpected nature, there's a trickster nature to reality. And whenever we actually collaborate with reality, we never really fully know what the outcome is going to be. And to me, this is also the crux of aliveness, which is one of the most powerful, one of the most incredible wisdom that Aries can teach us, right? So, in other words, if I have to put it simply, I will say that this is a week to truly marry kindness and respect with honesty, and then see what happens. All right, that's it by way of contemplations. I hope this is helpful for you. I hope this serves you in some shape or form. And if you would like to receive a reading or a divination session or subtle alchemy session, I have a couple spots available for April. And so, yeah, reach out to me. There will be links in the show notes below to my website where you can book a reading. And I would like to facilitate and to create space for you to alchemize and work with whatever is present in your reality in this moment. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for co-creating the space with me. And I hope that this contemplation is helpful as you move through your week. I'm sending you so much love, and I wish you a beautiful week. Thank you.